Welcome to the Teapot Reads. My name's Sam. I'm the Teapot. This is what I'm currently reading, and I'm so happy to see you today. Hello and welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if this is your first time. Yes, there's a fan in the background. Please do your best to tune it out. It is just to kind of noise cancel both on our end and on the other people's ends. And also, I'm filming this at night, which I almost never do. So hopefully the lighting is not too wonky. I will do things in post if I have to. I'm not here to mince words or dance around what we're doing. These are books that I want to reread in 2023. I'm going to show you the books. I'm going to tell you real quickly what they are, and I'm going to tell you real quickly why I want to reread them. I think I have 12 books. No, I don't know where I got that number from. There's 14 or 15, something like that. So more than 12. Honorable mention is Throne of Glass. I didn't want to pull it down because it's at the very top of my shelves, but I actually do really want to reread this whole series in the new year. They're getting new covers. You've probably seen them if you haven't. Here they are. Throne of Glass is by Sarah J. Maas. Very popular series. I actually used to reread these books every year in anticipation of the new release because I pre-ordered book one. Like, I was on top of that. I was like, this sounds good. I wasn't really part of social media. I had just stumbled upon it on Amazon and was in love with this idea of it. From that point forth, every time a new book in the series would come out, I would go back and start with book one again and reread it up to that point. It was always a really wonderful experience, and I've actually reread the series in its entirety. I did that back in 2020 during the pandemic when I was laid off. I don't remember if I made any videos about that or did any sort of vlogging, but I did reread it and it was great fun, and I think it's time for another reread. This is a super nostalgic, well-loved series. If you haven't heard about Throne of Glass, you're lying, so I'm not going to explain it. The next book is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This is the full color edition. It is absolutely gorgeous. And it's upside down and backwards because I'm just out of sorts, I guess. It is a really pretty. I'll showcase it a little more. I'm doing a book haul soon, so you can see more about it in that, but it is full color, and I don't want a spoilery picture. Without context, you have no idea what that means. Empire the Vampire by J. Kristoff is a sort of Name of the Wind. I see it tagged similar to that. Basically, it is about the last monster hunter, vampire hunter, Gabriel de Leon, who is at the point that this book starts, and like the present of the story is being held in a prison, a vampire prison, or like a prisoner of vampires, I should say. And I think he has 3 days before his execution, and he is being basically told to tell his life story to this vampire scribe. This is a world where the vampires have taken over. They've won. The sun is not really a contender, so they don't have many weaknesses. And so Gabriel is telling his life story, and we get to see we see some like present moments, although they're not super meaty because he's a prisoner, but we do see his sort of journey from a child to become a monster hunter, and then there's another time jump and a second timeline where he is telling about the quest for the Holy Grail, the quest for the Holy Grail, and this team that he joins on this sort of quest. Really love this book. I have wanted to reread it for a long time for kind of a fun reason, which is that I am making a Empire of the Vampire like gifty thing. So if I ever get the chance to meet J. Kristoff in person, I can give him this really cool thing that I'm working on. So no spoilers there, because I had started working on it and actually had to have a video kind of like going about it. But I also really want to reread it, not just to get like context for this project I'm working on, and not just because I loved this book, it was one of my favorites, but because I actually read an arc of it way back when I read it. I loved the arc. I don't really think much is going to change, but reading the arc, I did not get all the art. Like, I didn't get to read it and see the art on the next page, and so I would really love to experience that like melding of them together and like seeing things as they're described. So I really would like to do it for that reason. I have a feeling I will probably be doing this early in the new year just because of how badly I want to get to it. I could definitely see myself reading this edition even just so I get like the full color effect. Although I don't know if I want to be carrying this one around. Although maybe I'll be like super duper careful with it. I don't know. We'll have to consider it. Another really chunky fantasy I want to reread, and I actually would like to reread all of the books in the series that I haven't read or that I have already read and then catch up on it because it reached a stopping point recently, and that is Mistborn. This is the first one, The Final Empire, is by Brandon Sanderson. This is another really popular one. If you haven't heard about this super surprised. Basically, it is a fantasy world where you ingest, well, certain people, allomancers, can ingest metals and then they gain special powers. Most allomancers are restricted to one metal each, but there are some, the Mistborn, who have access to more. And I read this so long ago. I was probably still in high school when I read this trilogy for the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it and just became a Brandon Sanderson fan from that point forward. I did start reading Era 2 or 1.5, whatever you're going to call it, the Wax and Wayne books, and I wasn't super taken with it, but I do want to go back and catch up and read those because the Wax and Wayne series just ended. And also, I loved this book. I've been kind of talking about rereading it for a while. I've mentioned it here and there, and I think either this one or one of the other books in the series made it into my Dice Pick My TBR video, and so I would like to reread and catch up so that I can read the proper book for that challenge as well. These are chunky, but I'm kind of feeling chunky fantasy. It has been a mood that has overtaken me a lot lately, and I don't think it is going away anytime soon. We have Silver Under Nightfall by Rinchi Pecco. You are going to notice this book pop up in a lot of videos moving forward, and if you follow me on TikTok, which is linked down below, you will notice this pop up in pretty much every video that I am making moving forward, because this is one of my favorite books that I have read this year, and possibly one of my favorite books of all time. I would actually hazard a guess and say if I sat down and looked at my top however many again, this is probably in the top 10, if not the top 5. I absolutely adored it, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it, so I'm probably just going to reread it on the fact that I literally cannot stop thinking about it. I might even reread it this year. It might not even be in 2023. It might be in 2022, but it certainly will happen in 2023. Maybe it'll happen more than once. Silver Under Nightfall is the first in a duet. This is also a vampire-themed fantasy series, which is definitely a genre I love, so if you have anything similar to this or Empire the Vampire, I would be so grateful if you recommended them to me. Basically, it follows Remy. He is a vampire and monster hunter, very Witcher vibes, even though this book is based very heavily on the Netflix series Castlevania. And Remy gets he's sort of an outcast in society because of his parents, and particularly because of the interesting scenario of his mother's death and his birth, a moment, and there are vampires involved, and he is entangled in a mystery. Someone is creating these new types of vampires that aren't really vampires and aren't really human. Unlike in Empire the Vampire, these vampires have their own civilization and their own kingdoms, and in a lot of, or not a lot, but in some cases live peacefully with humans. They are sort of their own type of people, not so much a monster, although there are some that are monsters just because of the way the transformation works, and of course because there are even some humans who are monsters. And I really liked how this kind of tackled in this. And Remy teams up with Xiaodin and Zayadin. Ooh, they're very hard to pronounce. Xiaodin, Song, and Zidan. Xiaodin and Zidan. And they're vampires. They are engaged, and he becomes entangled with them. And yes, the line that I saw in a review that got me to read this was vampire throuple. It's really a solid book, though, outside of the queerness. Even with, the queerness makes it an even better book, but I would have loved it anyways. May as well just show you all the chunky books that I really want to reread. So next up is Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I absolutely adore this book, and I love Wise Man's Fear even more. It has been so long since I've read these. I think I read Wise Man's Fear. Well, I read them back to back, actually, but I think I finished them in maybe sophomore year of college, so that means nothing to you. I graduated in 2019, so 2 years prior to that, 3 years prior to that, maybe, let's say, because I think it actually was over the summer. I loved these. I know people have problems with them, and I'm not going to say that they're the perfect books. I don't think they're necessarily the top tier best fantasy ever written, but I do really enjoy them, and I just really, really want to return to them. Again, it's part of that chunky energy that they're bringing that I just really want to get back into, but also I want to sort of dive back into all the fan theories. I had a lot of fun after finishing what is written of this series, of reading the fan theories and seeing what people thought, and going into it, I think, for a second time. I don't have crystal clear memory of all the details, but I do remember the overall arc and arches of the story, and I think that'll give me a really nice perspective. And then also I can dip in and out of fan theories as I want, because I'm familiar with what is written. And yes, please, Patrick Rothfuss, please write book 3. It doesn't have to be soon, just please write it. And then the last really, really chunky one is these are all, I think, favorites. I'm not gonna say it's a favorite, because it is a favorite. Is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is the story of two magicians, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and not quite a competition, but sort of their lives together and apart and also just about England. I think it is set in like what year? It starts in 1806. And it is just a super immersive, I mean, it's huge, a super immersive, super intense experience. If you've never read this book, but you are curious, but you're like, this is a bit of a commitment, I actually do recommend watching the miniseries. It's not perfect. I wouldn't even say it's like amazing, but it is a pretty decent adaptation of this book. And if you like that, I think you'll definitely know that you'll like this book. This one also has like a bunch of, it has like what are these, footnotes and everything, and it just builds the world up so magnificently. I don't think I'm going to read this edition because this is an out-of-print collectible edition. It's part of the Bloomsbury Modern Classics, but I do love this cover. It's one of my absolute favorite covers, and I just think it's so neat and unique. This one, sort of the chunky fantasy, one of the reasons I really want to read it, I've just been craving that, but also because, again, it's been a very long time since I've read it. I love Piranesi. I reread, well, actually, I read it 1.5 times because I skipped a little bit of the beginning the second time I read it because it was like immediately after finishing it the first time. I just love Susanna Clarke's writing, and this is one of the few novels out there that I would say is so close to being perfect. I think because of how large it is and how extensive and expansive it is. It covers so much ground, it would be hard to really like mess it up at this level. But I just kind of want to return to that super, super built up, beautiful world and her writing because I do really miss it. And Piranesi reminded me, I think, how much I love her writing. From here on out, they're all much easier reads. Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee is a book I have reread 3 or 4 or 5 times. As you can see, I've tabbed it up a bit. This is the story of Monty and Percy. Monty is going on a tour of Europe before he has to basically take his life seriously, and he goes with Felicity and his younger sister, and Percy, who is his best friend and someone he is wildly in love with, and they just kind of have to confront this because it is a period piece. It's an adventure story. It's a lot of fun. It is super angsty. I adore Monty, even though he is peak problematic. He's just a really fun character to read about, and I adore him, and I see myself a little bit in him sometimes. Not always a good thing, probably always a bad thing actually. The reason I'm going to reread this is the reason I always tell myself I'm going to reread this, besides the fact that it's one of my favorite books of all time, is that I want to finally finish a series. I never read another book in a series unless you count the novella, which is also very cute. I am going to reread this and then back to back read the rest of the series. I'm just going to do it. I need to do it. I want to do it. There's really been nothing to stop me except other shiny objects seem to always pop up every time I settle down with the intention of finishing the series. I'm doing it this year, or 2023. I'm doing it in 2023. I will read all the Montague siblings books. It's happening. The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater is a book that the first time I read it, I was underwhelmed. I would have been a freshman in high school or a sophomore in high school, probably a freshman though. It was not the type of book I was interested in reading. I loved her Shiver series. I thought it was like fantastic, and I have since grown out of that kind of reading, and particularly that kind of series. I did try to reread it a couple years ago and it did not work out for me. Scorpio Races, though, is one that I have wanted to give another chance because I do think I would appreciate it a lot more now. One, I really like Maggie's writing, and one of the things that bothered me when I read it the first time was how different it was from Shiver, but I like where her writing has come since the Wolves of Mercy Falls, and so I'm really excited for that. And it's also the type of book that I just gravitate towards more now. It's got some folklore, it's got some real world, it's a little softer around the edges, it's not like a hard fantasy in any way, and it's very aesthetic and atmospheric. The Scorpio Races is about races. They're called the Scorpio Races. I don't remember all of the details, or really any of the details, because it has been so long since I've read it, but there is a race, and riders basically take water horses and try to race them to the finish line, and we have Puck is our protagonist, and she ends up entering in the race even though she hadn't intended to, and then Sean, who I believe won at some point previously, and there's love story there. I actually don't remember much of the plot, but I am really excited to give this one a second chance, and I think that the second chance will show that it really deserved to maintain its place on my shelf, because this is not the original copy I had. This is the Owl Crate 10th anniversary edition, but my original copy I have held on to since reading it. I never got rid of it, and that sort of surprises me. I think her name managed to convince me to keep it, because not long after reading this, I read the Raven Cycle, or started reading the Raven Cycle because it was not out yet, and I loved it. So this was just sort of the one that was mixed between two series that I absolutely adored and just didn't adore, and I'm really excited to give it a second shot. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is a little bit of a cop-out, just because I've managed to reread it, I think every year since I've read it, which would mean I've read it 2-3 times, however many years it's been. I really like Pride and Prejudice. I see no reason to stop this pattern of rereading it. It is a fairly quick read, and every time I read it I get a little bit more out of it, I think in part because I understand the language a little more and because I understand what is going on with the characters a little more. Yeah, it made me realize I do love Jane Austen, actually. So beloved book right here. Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor is another beloved book. I talk about this one a lot, I feel like, so you probably aren't surprised if you've been around on this channel. This is about Laszlo Strange, who is a librarian and ends up being recruited to go on a quest to help find a lost city, and Sarai, who is living in that lost city, though in a particular place that makes her a very exclusive type of outcast. Sarai is able to send herself out into people's dreams, and this is how she ends up meeting Laszlo. The two fall in love, and they basically try to save the city and each other. I love Laini Taylor's writing. I always have. The reason I really want to reread this one is because so many of the details are starting to fade. I would love to read both of them, and when I read this duet for the original first time, I just fell in love so quickly, and it became, again, one of my favorite books of all time, and I just really want to return to it, and I don't want all the details to fade. I want this story to maintain freshness in my mind because of how important it is to me. I'm not someone with a great memory, and it's quite natural for details to fade over time, but I just really don't want this one to get stale. I want to be able to return to this one frequently and just always be able to kind of reach forward in my mind and know about it, basically, and relive moments. And yeah, I'm just excited to go back. Uprooted by Naomi Novik was a book that when I picked it up I did not expect to love in the way I did. It is a more adult book than I thought it would be because I saw so many people talking about it as a YA text, but it scratches a very particular itch for me that has to do with the way the fairy tale retelling works and the way the characters work, and particularly the relationship between our protagonist, whose name is Agnieszka, and her love interest, her person, the dragon. I really liked their relationship. I also really like Agnieszka's relationship with her friend. I'm not going to go into that because I think it's a little bit spoiler territory there, but I did really like their relationship, and I just liked how all the characters worked on the page and how the world was built and how the magic worked. And really the arc that Agnieszka takes is so different from a lot of female protagonist arcs that we see in literature, and especially in fantasy, that I just really reveled in it. And this book in particular, I have just been thinking about a lot and been wanting to return to a lot. It has been a couple years since I've read it, and again, kind of like a lot of the books on this list, I am starting to forget a lot of details, and I just really would like to not forget those details. I would like to live in this world again and really enjoy it. I did like Spinning Silver, but not as much as this one, so if I reread this one, I don't actually think I'll be rereading Spinning Silver next year. Maybe in a couple years, but this is the one that like owns my heart a little stronger. So here's another book that I've read several times. This is kind of a similar story to Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. A little different. But this book is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. I have settled on the fact that I love this book. Now, the first time I read it, I was in high school, and it was a little over my head and super depressing, and I did not get it. It did not click with me, and I was like, that was such a terrible book. I will never own a physical copy because I think I had an ebook copy and I gave up on it. I was like, that was horrible. Why do people like it? And then sometime in college, I was loving the show, and I was like, okay, I'll give the book a try. And I read it, and I was like, this changed my life. This is amazing. Yes, it's depressing and traumatic, but it gets to like the heart of me as a person who loves stories. I loved it. I fell in love with it completely, and I do think I actually read it another time after that, because the second time I reread it, I was like, I'm going to read it again so that I have all the details, and then I will go into the rest of the series and finish it, because I have not read books 2 or 3. Guess what, though? I didn't do that. Just like Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, I never continued it. So I want to reread it, and I want to continue it, and I want to finish the series. I know it's probably going to fuck me up, but I'm kind of okay with that. I think I'm going to go into it expecting it to mess me up a lot. The Magicians is about Quentin Coldwater. You know what? No, okay. How would I pitch The Magicians? Because people for a while were like, it's adult Harry Potter. No. It is a little bit of like Hogwarts, but mostly it's like Narnia. It's like, always wanted to go to Narnia, and then you grew up and never went, but now you're an adult, and suddenly have magic. And yes, you can go to Narnia, and Narnia is kind of fucked up, and it's not what you wanted, but you are desperately holding on to it because you wanted to be there, because ever since you were a child, that was the only dream you could ever imagine. But life is sort of built to destroy your dreams. That's what these books are, or at least this one. I loved it. And every time I see geese, my first thought goes to Bright Bill's students. Okay? Every time I see geese. Now we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I read this book right when it came out. I read this one right when it came out, and I read book 2 right when it came out. And then there was such a long wait before book 3 that I never continued on with the series, even though I have been collecting them. So I have matching covers. There is an anniversary edition of this book coming out in 2023, which Samantha Shannon is going through and editing, which I have feelings about. We're not getting into it because that's not what this video is for. But I do really want to reread this one, the original text, and I would like to, again, continue on with the rest of the series, though I don't think it's necessary that I read them back to back. Even if I do one book a year, I think I'd be really content with that. I am 100% planning on reading Priory of the Orange Tree, hopefully in early 2023. Even better if I could read it this year, although I don't think I'm going to get to it. This one I'm definitely going to get to next year as a reread. I remember almost nothing about this. I do know that it's set in a sort of epic dystopian future, and Paige is a clairvoyant. Clairvoyants have basically been sent to prisons across the country. Scion is what it's called, but it's England. And Paige ends up in a prison, and she is sort of assigned to this person named Warden, who is kind of an angel. I don't remember more than that, but I do really remember enjoying it. And I do remember loving the world building. I think that was one of my favorite aspects of this book when I read it the first time. So I'm really excited to return to it, and hopefully I like it as much as I did. It would probably be interesting to read this back to back with the edited version, so I might try to do that, and I might do a video where I talk about my thoughts and feelings about an author going back and editing a book that has been published, because I do have thoughts, not just as a reader, but as a writer myself. Okay, finishing this off with 2 sci-fi books. I have had such a hankering for sci-fi lately. It has sort of been something I'm turning to a lot. I don't know why that is. I know what books kind of started it, but I don't know why it maintained as strongly as it had. I would like to reread Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. I love the Red Rising series so much. I don't feel like I need to reread books 1 through 3, because those, as long ago as it was that I read them, I feel like I have a pretty good grip on what happened in them still. I would like to reread Iron Gold, though, because it's a bigger book and because there were a lot more characters going on, and I really only remember what happened to Darrow and to the other Gold, whose name is Lysander. Those are the only 2 characters I really remember details of. But book 3 is coming out this year, and I think book 4 is coming out next year or the year after. Oh, I'm sorry. By this year, I mean 2023. Book 3 is coming out in 2023. Book 4 is coming out in 2024 or 2025, something like that. And I never actually read Dark Age. I don't know why I didn't. I just didn't. I was super pumped for this one, and I read it fairly recently to when it released, but I never continued on past that. So I would like to reread it, would like to read Dark Age, and then be prepped for book 3 that is coming out later in 2023. And I honestly don't mind the wait for these books, because we have so many to go back and return to. I don't mind the wait for books in general. I mean, for the most part, I can deal with it. I know it's very hard to write a book. Maybe that's a video content, though, because there are a couple authors who I want to just like tell them to get it together and write. One of them's on this list. Anyway, we're not talking about that. My last book that I really want to reread in 2023, and that I think I will, this one is probably the easiest one on that list, All Systems Red by Martha Wells. I actually just want to reread this one because it was such a pleasure to read it last year. I absolutely loved it. I would like to continue on with the Murderbot series, and I can definitely see myself just zooming through all of them back to back to back. These are fantastic. If you haven't read All Systems Red or any of the Murderbot books, you are totally missing out. It is about a AI killing machine robot that basically hacks itself and just wants to watch soap operas and read and just be, but has to keep saving people. It's it's so good. I don't even think you can express how wonderful and emotional this book is. It is so short, so you wouldn't believe what a punch it packs, but All Systems Red is fantastic, and this one is by Martha Wells. So those are the books I really want to reread in 2023. I really did not do a lot of rereading in 2022. I kind of find myself getting into this weird pattern of I'll spend 1 year doing a lot of rereading, and then the next year or the next 2 years I just don't, and then the year after I do a lot of rereading. And hey, next year is kind of fitting that pattern because I didn't do a lot of rereading this year. So I think it's highly likely I will reread not only these, but quite a few other books. I'm not setting it like an official goal, like I have to reread one book every month. That's not happening, but these are ones that I've just really, really had a craving for lately, and there's no reason not to read it. So if this is your first time watching one of these videos and you want to see more content, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me. I appreciate it so very much. If you're somewhere cold, I hope you're staying warm. If you're somewhere warm, I hope you're staying comfortable. And most of all, I hope you're reading a great book. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.